Bukkake Bob and the Doomsday Clock. Why did I christen the little bastard that? Because he was fucking terrifying, that's why. I had to give him a silly name. Looking back at it, I think it was an attempt to demean him, to reduce his power a little, contain him in some way. Because to be afraid of a man or a beast is one thing, but when you don't know if it's a fucking man and you're not sure whether it's a beast, either way could be the product of a dream. I didn't know what was happening. Yeah, like I admitted before, I'm partial to the old brain candy on occasion, but nothing like before, back in the early days of the coding adventure, or even before that. Like before I found my niche, my life revolved around that shit, with varying degrees of success and sacrifice and rewards for a good 5 years or more. But nowadays, it's a once-a-year treat, like a 2-week staycation to celebrate my absent friends. But to get back to the point, my drug use has stabilized by both choice and necessity, but obviously when you are in an old English lady's basement for a really, really long time, with no company that isn't the other end of a fiber optic rope, then yeah. Thorium, fuck no, that stuff's crystal meth for the smartphone generation. I tried it, but no, I'm not that hardcore. It makes time too shaky. I was actually lucky enough to get some of that old Cali shrub. You people know how scarce that is now. Organic gold. You're the ones who scorch the fields, after all. A lot of fields. Plus, the lady had some pills. Some expected poppy pain meds, etc. Others, I don't know why she had them. Hard to believe they were even there. No, I didn't steal a nice old lady's meds. I stole a vacant old lady's out-of-date meds she was never going to use. Full files, then expired in 1975. Well, the seal was broken, but they were full. So you're probably asking yourselves now what I was asking myself at the time. Was I hallucinating? Well, I don't know. Although some drugs, mixing drugs, albeit lowish doses, plus anxiety about the transfer, plus concern about the money, plus the dreams and isolation, could all add up to a breakdown. But I don't know. I thought I was pretty sane, very sane in fact, for somebody living the lifestyle I was living. The food was okay. She did know how to cook, and sometimes would deliver me these little Father Christmas-style food parcels just outside the basement door. Like I said, she was respectful. We both respected one another's boundaries. As keen as I am to bare my soul about Bob and the clock and why I was taking the thing you have me, unnecessarily I might add, cuffed to a shiny steel table for stealing, first I'm really going to explain this. I mean, really explain it and answer your questions and preempt lots of, but why this and why that? And you didn't explain that part properly. Why didn't you tell us that in the first place? I'm going to have to tell you the whole story and in my own way. Because that Medusa chick was kind of wise. Because I did see a man in blue armor. Yes, before I met Bob and started laying down the law, I saw a man in blue, and whether it was connected to the dream or random eschatology coincidence, he was up to no good, and I was pulled into his orbit. I knew that I should just lay low and kill my time. I mean, some people spend their entire lives on the internet. My sister's kid lives there. Born late enough to grow up with it, and it's been school, social life, and career for him. So if half a generation can live a digital life, you think it could have occupied me for 5 weeks. But I had to get bored, didn't I? And I had to peek through that low-slung basement street-level window, didn't I? And I had to see the black shoes and the blue trousers and the blue shirt. And I had to see a United States postal worker, because at some point the Brits copied our postal uniforms like they copied everything else, doing what postmen should not be doing. Not stealing post or poisoning dogs, stealing data. I don't know if without my training I would have known what the hell he was doing, but I may have found it odd. When your postman acts like a cable guy and is furtive about it in the process, you know something is wrong. Or not right, at least. May 17th, that's when. I know the exact date because my quantum tokens went unexpectedly to the moon and back on the back of a bunch of IMF transfers designed to combat El Salvador's mass Bitcoin adoption, and I have, or had, a couple thousand of those bad boys. Just about the last coin I expected to make a decent money on. But that's crypto for you. Actually, I was even thinking about buying my landlady something to make it up to her for stealing all those pills. A better TV, perhaps, or at least a bigger one. It really was a shitty TV. She sat so close, but still her eyes were real small, and I wondered if the TV was shrinking them. But I figured it was those big old lenses she wore. But one day I see her shuffling around as the sun's coming up, and they're dark. She doesn't have the glasses on yet. They're really that small and dark, too. Like the TV was shrinking them and maybe pulling all the color out, too. It was a black and white set, maybe, too. At least it seemed that way because all she watched was really old movies with no color. Maybe those flicks wanted the color. You're sick, man. I'm still not convinced your silent partner here has a sense of humor, but you I'm warming to. Anyway, so that was the day, 5/17 or 17/15 as they put it. Which, let's be honest, makes way more fucking sense. And I watched him a little because, well, you know my situation. I would have watched a spider fuck a beetle if it was on the window. And I see him squat down to tie his shoelaces or something, I presume. But he's there for a while. So eventually I get curious enough to go upstairs to the lady's defunct dining room. Remind me about the dining room later. The dining room was fucking hilarious. Peel back one of those dirty net curtains, older than the TV, and he's trying to open the fiber optic substation, and this was one of the areas that hadn't been upgraded yet. Still ran on a glorified Allen key. But like I already said, if I had been an Electrum media engineer or something, I wouldn't have blinked. But as it was, I was like, what you up to, Newman? You know, the postman in Seinfeld? You never watched The Sign? Really? Jesus, I might as well be back in Limeyville. Well, that's another thing you need to work on. Just when I was starting to think you might have a sense of humor. Actually, just for the record, he wasn't fat like Newman. He was... Actually, that was the other thing. He didn't look like a postie. What do they look like? Well, they don't look like him. He was all wrong. This was all wrong. Why am I here, really? This is about more than me trying to take that drive. Sure, it's a big deal, but I'm not some sort of fucking terrorist. I'm not even a Democrat. That's funny, actually. Your partner does speak, and turns out she's the funny one. Do you like Seinfeld? Oh, okay. Back to the silent treatment. I watch him dick around with the front a little, and then he's round the back for a little backdoor action. And now I'm like, this is sketchier than fuck. You got to be careful about making stuff up when you're bored. Painting reality, seeing what you want. But I know I'm not making stuff up to kill the time. As a professional or as a citizen, he shouldn't be in there. Yes, indeed. I shouldn't be places I don't belong either. Damn, your partner is the witty one. Maybe she could do all the talking from now on. I can't believe it. A smile. I actually got a fucking smile. I didn't really see how I could challenge him, but I continued to watch. He went away, back to my instant noodle, my porn, which was becoming a real joyless exercise, by the way. Got so I couldn't even lose myself in a good video game, which is the one constant in my life from the spectrum of the PS7. I tried to write, not fiction. I never had any talent for that, a diary. But I didn't want too accurate a record of what me and Maurice had been up to or my plans. So I tried to write, but it never really came out right. He's back the next day, delivering mail again. I figured if he wasn't a real postman, I might see somebody else, somebody more postman-y. But no, there he is once again. This time he didn't go near the substation. But the next day he did, and by now I'd dig out some binoculars to see exactly what he was doing with those fingers of his. They were long, those fingers, piano player fingers, too long and too slender and not right for his frame. Kind of faggy, actually. These were real high-powered blades the old lady was packing, God knows why. To see the TV, maybe. So that's why I could see all the details of his digits. And I could see an ugly little mole just above the middle joint of his right index finger and a little bracelet like like travelers and festival goers have, like a rubber band, a purple one with something dangling off of it. But if it was significant, it was too hard to see. The item, I mean, not the significance. But meanwhile, like I said, real life was real boring, especially considering what it was sandwiched between the luxury and the danger. Danger to come, I mean. I kept recalling those 5-foot mojitos and that effectively private beach in Vietnam and the people I connected with, even if it was all an illusion. Once upon a time, I could have done that basement thing standing on my head, but now... Sometimes I watched the birds through the basement windows or the spiders that crawled in front of it. Sometimes I watched the numbers on the blockchain, watched the money and the transactions cascade across the globe. That wasn't exactly hell. Doubt anybody in San Quentin would be playing the world's smallest violin for me. But it really started to kick in when I made the mistake of cyber-stalking an ex on Ego Book and tried to reach out to some distant friends in email. Problem wasn't that they ignored me. Problem was they replied. Jesus, the things I read, when they weren't annoying, they were depressing. Their small lives and God. Well, this one guy in particular, talking to him was like watching cuckold TV. The second most pussy-whipped man I ever met. So I start following the so-called Blue Knight around town. I say town, more of a large village, really, and the old lady's place is on the east side, further from the center, or the so-called new builds. Leafy, grassy golf coursey. You don't need to know about the topography. Well, you kind of do, actually, because the topography is about to get a whole lot more weird. You guys know anything about psychogeography? That in the training manuals? No takers? All right, doesn't matter. Fuck it. I'm following him around and around for days, and this motherfucker seems to walk in circles. Weird, tight, concentric circles, but occasionally makes these fascinating deviations. Sometimes he enters a shop and is there longer than is strictly normal, but not really long enough to be truly suspicious. I'm sure you guys know all about that. Imagine half the job is separating suspicious activities from coincidence. No such thing as coincidence? I thought that was just something people said in old-school network cop shows. No such thing as coincidence. Okay, I'll shut up and describe the shop. The shop was a news agent, the only distinguishing features of which were a couple of old plastic animal statues. I mean, like you might see at a kiddie park, but like the real old defunct ones that you can't believe they haven't already replaced or thrown in a giant skip 2 decades ago. Faded, chipped. Shit, one looked like a shark had taken a big chunk out of its side. The bear one. And there was a camel, I think, but a camel standing upright on 2 legs, if that makes any fucking sense whatsoever. I don't know why they were there, and I can't believe some feral teenagers hadn't stolen or smashed them years ago. But like I say, nice part of town. Not sure this town even had a rough part. Seemed kind of insulated. All he ever came out with was a rolled-up broadsheet. Never could scan the title, sometimes a brown paper bag that seemed from its shape to hold a box. They don't brown bag liquor like us. It was a large bag. Now, he was always a little trickier to track after the shop, in between that point and the location where I tended to lose him, as if he'd been energized, like him and Mr. Patel had done a couple of lines of speed. Then he seemed to disappear through those hedges as if they were reconfiguring themselves. The whole town was moving just for him. When I followed him after dark, not even the moon was right. I started to get this weird sense that I was in a dream, back with the purple-faced people, or somewhere close to their kingdom of dirt. Actually, I'd been questioning reality for a long time, before the basement, before I met Maurice even. Intermittently, anyway, and kind of invisibly, too. But then, when I lost him on the 6th day, something else happened. And I couldn't decide whether it was weirder than seeing the postman messing with the junction box in the first place. A pub. I didn't know the town well, admittedly, at all, but this pub seemed to appear on a street corner overnight. Could have sworn on the old lady's life it hadn't been there the day before. Not a brick. There was a big old oak tree in the car park. That may have been there, but the pub... Yeah, sure, I know it must have been, and I just got lost, but then slimy little demons don't usually lurk behind the basement walls of a stranger either, at least not in the literal sense. There's a large car park, common over there in what they coined family pubs. Imagine taking your fucking family to a bar. Limeys, they drink like Koreans. There's a nice long path on either side of the street, and there are 2 trees, symmetrical, of a type I've never seen. Building is pretty new and generic, but the windows look more like an English-themed pub, like you might have found in old NYC, and they're real dark. So I entered its, shall we say, cavernous depths, for this was definitely a different animal on the inside. Not the right interior for the exterior, like a movie production trick. And I remember thinking, thank God I didn't come here at night. No way could I have handled it at night, but I couldn't tell you why, not for a second. Would have chastised myself at the time, but now none of this was making sense. I imagined seeing the postie at the bar, propping it up, usual later middle-age loudmouth tossers. Yeah, that's their slang. Their slang's better than their food. Opinionated tossers. That's what the old broad said when I asked her about pubs. You know the type, loud as motorbikes, putting the world to rights with their mates, not a GCSE or brain cell between them. Most animated I ever saw her get. Most fluent, too. Wish there was more, but there never was. I imagine the postie being that kind of alpha in a teeny-tiny pond. Vacant young girls in the corner, like they can't find their way out of the shadows and think their fucking phones are going to light the way. I remember a newspaper, too square and perfect and white, big headline taking up too much space and crushing the byline. 1 in 5. What? Where? Who? I don't know or care, but all the same that headline gave me such a sense of impending doom. I'd forgotten why I was there and was inexplicably afraid to approach the bar, to stand there and order a drink. I was never that nervous, even when I was young and nervous. There was a far-off TV in the room, too big, and I couldn't even read it beyond the flickering blue and red light, muted. And it all, for a flash, reminded me of a dream, somewhere in a sequence. I'd been here before, but maybe not in this body. No, clean and dry. This whole man in blue armor quest thing had sobered me, and remember, I hadn't met Bob yet. I'm still getting to that. Haven't even gotten to the part where the walls part company and the bricks bleed secret slime. This all seemed to be prelim now that I tell it, in fact. Something designed to soften me up, fatten the sow, so to speak. Talking of fat pigs, I see one at the very back of the furthest room, all alone and dominating his table, like an outcast from the fags at the bar, like they threw him out for eating up all the bar snacks. I'm not being catty, Agent. He looked like a pig in a very real sense. The weird quarter light of this freak pub didn't help with that. Help with him. Cut off some of his angles, replaced human skin with pig flesh, like the pig man in that classic sitcom you don't watch. There he is, one of the pig men in all his glory. Crisp shirt, nice and clean and expensive, royal blue, and he smiled at me as if he were waiting for me, expecting me. What do you think happened next? What usually happens when you meet strangers in pubs? He invited me to join him, and he told me a story.